Te reo ererangi o Te Mānia. This episode was produced in Ōtautahi by Plains Media, with support from New Zealand On Air.
Excited because I've got the lovely Elizabeth Goodwin with me, who I've worked with and beside for many years. She works across Awhinga, Mātua, and is a long-term advocate for parents whose children are disabled. She knows the research, she knows her stuff, and is a parent herself in this realm. So if there's anything that you need to know, she's going to know it.
No pressure, Anna.
Thanks for joining us for Being Real Parents with me, Anna, and my colleague and buddy,
Kate. We work in the parenting space.
And it's here where we'll talk about our worlds as parents, the good, the not so good, and the hilarious, and mix this with what we know about behaviour and psychology.
So lovely to have you with me, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for coming here and having this cordial. Yeah.
It's a pleasure. I hope it's useful.
Oh, totally. So I really want to know your journey in this. I know some of it, and it's beautiful. And I'm guessing starts with you as a parent, but maybe not. So you tell me.
Yeah, absolutely starts with me as a parent. So, I mean, I'm quite old now, so it goes back a long way. And, but, you know, I was lucky that Jessie was born in the 80s at a time of lots of social change, and, you know, there was lots of activism. And it was so that was a challenging and sort of great time to be starting off in this world. So Jessie was born in 1984, so long time ago. And at that time, I mean, I hadn't had much to do with disability. You know, kids, I grew up in a country town not far from you, where you're sitting now. And kids who were different tended to be sent off to, I don't know, institutions and special schools in Timaru. And so, it was a world that I didn't really know much about. And then Jessie developed cerebral palsy after an interrupted cot death. And so I was plunged into this world, which has been actually a magical, but a hard but magical world to be in. And it's just really enriched things. So she developed cerebral palsy with quite was always dependent for all of her needs. So it was pretty black and white. It was pretty black and white. Jessie, you just did what I had to do. And moved from Timaru to Auckland and sort of got involved. There I met other parents and got involved with the push to close institutions and for kids to go to their local school. So, yeah, that's where the real stuff happened, really. Yeah.
Oh, that is an exciting time. That's an incredible change, hey?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I still see the mums that I used to plot with way back then, and it's really interesting to see how we've all got on. Yeah, it's been amazing, really.
You're listening to Being Real Parents on Plains Media, broadcasting on 96.9 FM, streaming live and available as a podcast on plains.org.nz. And
you became an advocate in this space, and then ngā awhi Mātua, I mean, that's quite a wee while later, yeah?
Yeah. So what happened was, so I was, deeply involved in the 80s. Inclusion happened, yeehaw, but still hard. And I ended up moving to Wellington and became employed by IHC. I was the comms manager, and then I went off and that's when I met you, when I started working on the SKIP project around positive parenting. So I sort of left disability behind a bit, but I got into social change and learned about sitting with people and listening to their stories, and then taking those stories and working with those same people to create change. And so we did that a lot, you'll remember, back in the day, with parents to understand what was happening with their parenting, because SKIP was set up to stop physical punishment of children. And of course, what we started to understand was the things that were triggers for parents, and there were all sorts of different things, and that working with and not telling parents was really important, and bringing yourself to the table. And, you know, I when I first started that work, I used to ring my older daughter and apologise to her about my parenting all the time. But anyway, and so she told me...
I'm still doing that,
she said,
even though I work in the field.
And so that was really big for me. And I think moving out of disability into that sort of world of social innovation and social change was an important thing to then take back into the disability world. So what happened was I left the public service and set up on my own, and was approached to do a project doing co-designs with parents of disabled children around the country. And my business partner, if you like to call her a business partner, the woman I worked with, and I went and interviewed 80 families around the country. And we recorded all of those interviews and transcribed them and read them through, and spent days in a room looking for themes and ways that we could sort of tell the story of those families. And it was amazing. I mean, we looked and said, you know, do they have things in common because their children are a similar age, or they're rural, or is it income, or what is it? And what we discovered was it was their well-being. That was what helped us to think about groups of parents and how their well-being was, and what contributed to that, and what turned negative into a positive. And so we ended up with 4 groups of parents, which we called the struggling. So they were the parents who it was always hard. You know, it started off hard and it just stayed hard. And that was quite a small group of parents, but we were concerned about those parents, obviously. And then we had a group of parents where it started hard, but something, and this was quite a large group, something flipped on their journey, because we talked about, I mean, we spent ages with them all, and they talked about their journey, as I am now, Anna. And something would flip them into a sort of a more positive way of being. And then there were families that it was an up and down sort of journey. And then there were a small number of where everything started positive and it was positive all the way through. So things happened and they just dealt with it. And they were also a small group. So the larger groups were the sort of ones that flipped and up and down. And so we started looking at why those changes happened. And they weren't about services. They weren't about, oh, we found a teacher aide, or we found a cure, or, you know, it was about what it is for all families, really. It was about social connection, finding people like me, learning to manage the situation, like it might be behaviour or medical needs or whatever it is, but actually having a feeling of agency. It was about, for one mum, it was about leaving her husband and going and living with a mother. Best thing she ever did, she said. And for some there was one mum who stopped drinking, and she, had issues before her child was born, and she sort of pulled herself together, went back to where she was from. And the stories were sort of extraordinary, and making a friend or whatever. And I just was so excited by that. I thought there were such valuable sort of stories for professionals and the world to know about, that this isn't a hugely medical thing. This is actually, like the rest of us, people need informal support and knowledge, really. Anyway,
amazing.
I took that information and I thought, I want to know more about the strugglers, the people for whom it's hard. So I went to the IHC Foundation and got some government funding to go and spend time with parents in Levin and Palmerston North. And I sort of did the same sort of exercise, but I got them along after I did the interviews, and it sort of distilled it and got my main themes. And I got them into design days. So we had one at McDonald's and one at a school. And they talked about the things that would make a difference. And so we did little prototypes. And one was, it would be really good to have an online place where everyone could connect with each other and learn, which fits exactly with, all the research. And then at another workshop, they didn't talk about that so much, but I noticed that these parents lived in a smallish town, and we got a classroom at the school to do the design day, and their kids went to the school and they hadn't met each other. I just found that extraordinary. And anyway, and one mother said to me, I want to toileting is the thing that really stresses me. And I said, how many kids have you got? And she said 5. And I said, well, what are you doing about it? And she said, oh, well, I've been on the waiting list to see a paediatrician for 18 months. And I said, well, what did you do with the rest of your kids? And she went, oh, I talked to my mum, the Plunkett nurse, the GP. It's like the answers are all around them. I mean, toileting is something that is not, obviously it can be a medical issue, but there are people in the community, and there are aunties and there are cousins and there are other parents who are full of tips for toileting. I mean, you must find this in your work all the time. And also what we know about toileting and parenting from the work that I did around positive parenting is that toileting is a real trigger for everyone, and it's often something that leads to negative consequences for everyone. Anyway, and I said, what about your mum? What about them? And she went, oh yeah, I could do that, And then I talked to my sister, who's a public health nurse, who was a public health nurse, who hadn't had a lot to do with disability other than, Jessie. And she said, oh, I've toilet trained everyone in Marlborough. And I said, have any of them got disabilities? Yep, but, it's the same thing. And I thought, we sort of make all of this so complicated, and it's actually, again, often informal support. I mean, I acknowledge totally that sometimes it's a bit more complicated than that. But, I remember my sister telling me about a little boy with autism who she was supporting, and she said they just moved the time he went to school because he had to go in the morning. It took time. So they arranged for him to go to school a bit later so he could have his routine and do whatever he had to do, and it took, and she said, and we got there. And it's, you know what I mean? It's not, making an appointment with a paediatrician, waiting 18 months, going along, the paediatrician, what will say, well, there's nothing physically wrong. It's so,
Yeah.
so.
And you put life on hold while that happens, thinking the answer will come from this amazing person. And actually sometimes it does, and sometimes, you've worked it out by then anyway, doing the sorts of things that you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, with Jessie, oh my God. She always wore naps, there was no chance of toilet training her. But for years, I used to put her on the loo after, at times during the day, and I'd wait for something to happen, and it was just extraordinary. And someone said to me, why do you do that? Like, she wears naps. She hardly ever goes on the loo. Why do you bother? And that's all I needed to say, all right, we'll stop there. Poor old Jess being strapped to a, toilet chair. It was just terrible. But it takes someone to say, oh, that's not very comfortable for her, and it's not much fun for you, waiting for the great event, which, anyway. So from all of those beautiful conversations and the generosity, really, of people telling me their stories and their ideas, we came up with a number of things that we thought we could do to make life better for those families. And one was to create a social connection happens at work. And so they couldn't work because their kids were at school and they had to stop when school stopped. So we got funding for after school and trained a local after school provider to look after kids with disabilities. And then another thing was a mum said to me her social life was doing road patrol at school, and that she had 2 little boys who were disabled, and she couldn't take them to the park because it wasn't fenced. So, and one of them was a runner, and so she had to pay for someone to go to the park with them. And that your heart bleeds, really. And then other mums said to me, I don't take my kids downtown. We don't go out much because we're judged. And so one of the things that we've been doing, I'll get to Awhi eventually, but it is part of a sort of a package, is that we thought, let's build a park near where a lot of those families live, and it can be a park where they can go and sit. Their children are safe because it's fenced. They can sit and they can talk to each other and meet each other and meet their neighbours without, they can walk there, their kids are safe, there are things for them to do. And so we have partnered with the iwi and IHC and the Pacific community to build a park in Levin that honours the culture of the place, that tells this beautiful story of the iwi, that honours the Pacific community there. There's a huge Pacific community, and that is a gathering place for families. And
wow.
We've built the toilet, which is enormous. I mean, that's a huge thing, because the people who live around the park want to do CrossFit and things, and they wanted a shower, and families want showers. And we have built the fence, and we are just about to go into the second phase of building a little whale, of building po and stepping stone and all sorts of things that tell the story. So that's another thing that came out of that research. And then the third thing was Awhi Ngā Mātua. And this was about connecting people online. And so I had this idea that came through the workshops, and then I went to IHC and said, let's partner to do this. And because they have got an amazing library. And, you know, if you're going to do things like this, you've got to have an evidence base. And I think often that doesn't happen. And I knew that they were looking for innovation, and they have family whānau coordinators. Anyway, so we were all set to go, and COVID happened. So we were going to build a platform, and then COVID happened. And so Janine Stewart from IHC is, you know, a real goer, and she rang me and said, what are we going to do? And we decided to set up a Facebook page. So we set up Awhi at Home, and we started doing tips, and then every single person in the world was doing tips, and we decided that we'd think about parent wellbeing and connection. And so we did all sorts of things. We made little videos with the wonderful Fiona McKenzie in Christchurch. We got a letter. We did a letter that people taking their children for a drive to calm them could show the police if they were stopped. I mean, we did all sorts of things, and we asked for ideas, and it really went well. And it was we were I was online throughout lockdown. It was exciting
for all the right reasons.
And it was we had Mal, who works at IHC, who's a dad, and he did all the tech stuff. So it was, and we had the library. So it was an extraordinary time to sort of test that concept of what we could do online. And there were other Facebook pages doing also connecting parents. It was a busy time for all of us helpers, really, in a way. And then we decided that we would see if we could create a platform offline that didn't rely on Facebook. And so we worked with parents, we did co-design with parents, we worked really hard to do that. And we just couldn't do what we wanted it to do, which was basically to act like Facebook, but to be deeper with people. And I think, you know, there are all sorts of people trying to do this, and it will happen. And then Emily Wrights came on board, and she did an amazing job of really turning to activism again around the changes that the government wanted to do with support for families. So for a while there, we became activists, and we gathered signatures and stories and presented these to government. And then we took another breath, which we're quite good at doing. Okay, so how are we doing? What do we do? I mean, you'll be, you know, social change. You've got to think, is this working? And we thought that we needed to build a really solid base, and we needed to sort of take a breath and go back to the original concept of building agency, of building people's knowledge, understanding and confidence around parenting, of telling stories and connecting people. So we've now got a full-time Gemma, a full-time coordinator, who's working on doing that based on a website and using social media more as a way of promoting what we're doing. So what we're quietly, and this is what I learned with the park, is you quietly build community. We went out there and went, whoosh, here we are, da-da-da-da-da, we're getting the text sorted, and of course it didn't sort. And so now we've taken a breath and we're saying, we're just going to build a community step by step at the community's pace by telling stories, by opening the library, the wonderful world of the library, by caring deeply about our community and just going at that pace. So it's sort of a interesting story of following what's going on in the world while also learning a huge amount, and by experimenting and going with seeing where we end up. So this isn't a woohoo, here we are story. It's a story of a group of people who care deeply about our community and want to address those needs that, popped up through all those conversations around, there's someone here who cares about you. There are other people like you. There are things that you can learn that will make your life easier. We celebrate you. We celebrate your children. And we want to change the world, but we know we can't do it next week.
Speaking of next week, you're going to come back because
is that such
and I have loved every minute of talking to you and your journey. The website, people can find you on the website.
Yeah, Mātua.org.nz. Yeah,
beautiful. And and we will advertise.
And we welcome stories, and we welcome, we tell us what you want from us. This is, as I say, this is about us.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us today.
We hope you've learned that while parenting is challenging sometimes, that's totally normal. It's been fun having you with us. Keep being amazing. Bye!